Did you know that one man's financial wisdom saved multiple nations from economic collapse? His name was Joseph, and his story reveals 7 powerful money habits that transformed him from a prisoner into the most influential financial advisor in history. Because biblical wealth principles didn't start with modern economics. They started with divine revelation. And if you apply these 7 habits, your financial life can change not by chance, but by following God's proven blueprint. In this video, I'm going to show you the 7 money habits that Joseph used to save Egypt and surrounding nations from complete financial ruin. A man who went from slavery to the second most powerful position in the ancient world, not because of political connections, but because of supernatural wisdom and disciplined execution. Stay until the end, because habit number 7 reveals the secret that made Joseph's success sustainable for generations. Joseph's journey teaches us that financial breakthrough begins with divine direction, not human cleverness. When Pharaoh shared his troubling dreams about 7 fat cows followed by 7 lean cows, every wise man in Egypt failed to provide answers. But Joseph didn't rely on his own understanding. Genesis 41:16 records his response, "I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." This wasn't false modesty. This was the foundation of everything that followed. The first habit that separated Joseph from every other advisor was his complete dependence on God's wisdom for financial decisions. While others trusted their own intelligence and experience, Joseph understood that true prosperity flows from heaven's perspective. He didn't make a single financial recommendation without acknowledging that God was the source of his insight. This principle transforms everything because when you recognize that your money, talents, and opportunities come from God, you stop making decisions based on fear and start making them based on faith. Modern financial advisors might call this impractical, but Joseph's humility actually increased his credibility with Pharaoh. The king was so impressed with Joseph's approach that he declared, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" Divine wisdom doesn't diminish your professional reputation. It enhances it because people recognize authenticity and supernatural insight when they encounter it. The second habit Joseph demonstrated was systematic planning during abundance. When God revealed the coming economic crisis through Pharaoh's dreams, Joseph didn't just warn about future problems. He presented a comprehensive solution. Genesis 41:34 records his advice. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. This wasn't a suggestion born from panic. This was strategic preparation based on divine revelation. Joseph established the 20% principle that still revolutionizes finances today. He didn't say, "Save whatever remains after expenses." He commanded that 20% be set aside before anything else was distributed. This habit requires discipline because it means living on 80% of your income even when times are good. Most people do the opposite. They spend everything during prosperous seasons and wonder why they struggle when difficulties arrive. The third habit Joseph mastered was infrastructure development for long-term sustainability. Storing grain for 7 years required more than good intentions. It demanded organizational systems, storage facilities, transportation networks, and trained personnel. Joseph didn't just collect grain and pile it randomly. He stored up grain in the cities, with systematic distribution across the nation. He understood that good planning without proper execution leads to failure. This principle applies directly to personal finances today. Having a savings goal means nothing without the systems to achieve it. Joseph's success required establishing what amounted to a Department of Agriculture and Revenue. He had to learn legislation, communication, negotiation, transportation, food storage methods, economic forecasting, record-keeping, and real estate acquisition. Financial breakthrough demands developing the skills and systems necessary to manage what God provides. The fourth habit that made Joseph's approach legendary was his strategic patience during crisis implementation. When the famine arrived, Joseph didn't immediately open the storehouses. Genesis 41:56 says he waited until the famine had spread over the whole country. before beginning distribution. He understood that premature action could exhaust resources before the crisis ended. This required incredible discipline because people were suffering and demanding immediate relief. Joseph knew that proper resource management sometimes means saying no to urgent requests in order to ensure long-term survival. He rationed distributions carefully, providing enough for survival but not excess that would deplete reserves too quickly. This habit challenges our instant gratification culture where we want immediate solutions to every financial pressure. The fifth habit Joseph practiced was ethical wealth accumulation during economic opportunity. As the famine continued and people exhausted their personal resources, Joseph sold grain to them in exchange for money, then livestock, then land. Some might view this as exploitation, but Joseph was actually creating a sustainable economic system that prevented complete social collapse. Genesis 47:20 records that Joseph bought all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh through these transactions. However, this wasn't corrupt capitalism. Joseph was building national wealth that would benefit future generations. He established a system where Egypt received 20% of future harvests as ongoing revenue, creating multiple income streams for the nation's continued prosperity. If this message is helping you understand biblical financial principles, subscribe to the channel Kingdom Finances and let me know in the comments which habit challenges you most. The sixth habit Joseph demonstrated was transparent stewardship with complete integrity. Despite managing enormous wealth and having unlimited opportunities for personal enrichment, Genesis 47:14 states that Joseph brought the money to Pharaoh's palace. He didn't keep secret accounts or skim profits for himself. Every transaction was conducted with absolute honesty and accountability. This habit builds the foundation for sustainable wealth because integrity attracts divine blessing and human trust. People knew they could depend on Joseph's word and his commitment to their welfare rather than his own advancement. Joseph understood that wealth without wisdom leads to destruction, but wealth guided by divine principles creates generational blessing. His transparency established a legacy that extended far beyond his lifetime because future leaders could trust the systems he created. The seventh and most powerful habit Joseph practiced was building wealth that serves others rather than self. When surrounding nations began suffering from the same famine, Genesis 41:57 tells us that all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe everywhere. Joseph's financial management didn't just save Egypt. It positioned the nation to become a source of provision for the entire known world. This habit transforms your entire relationship with money. Joseph never viewed wealth as something to hoard for personal security. He saw it as a tool to fulfill God's purposes and bless others. His storage program saved his own family when they came from Canaan seeking food during the famine. The very brothers who had sold him into slavery were now dependent on his wise financial stewardship for their survival. Joseph's approach reveals that true biblical wealth multiplies when it flows through you rather than stopping with you. He created an economic system that generated ongoing revenue for Egypt while providing life-saving resources to desperate nations. This principle challenges the scarcity mindset that drives most financial decisions today. When you manage money with the understanding that God has entrusted it to you for kingdom purposes, every dollar becomes an opportunity to advance His plan rather than just your comfort. Joseph's grain sales funded Egypt's expansion and influence throughout the region. His financial wisdom became a testimony to the power of the God he served. The timing of Joseph's story demonstrates God's perfect preparation for His people's preservation. The wealth Joseph accumulated through wise management provided the resources necessary for Jacob's family to relocate to Egypt and grow into a great nation. Without Joseph's financial systems, the future nation of Israel might have perished during the global famine. This seventh habit requires the longest-term perspective of all because you're building wealth that will impact people you may never meet. Joseph stored grain for 7 years before the first day of famine arrived. He managed Egypt's resources for decades, knowing that his decisions would affect generations after him. Modern application of this habit means asking different questions about your financial choices. Instead of wondering how much you can accumulate, you start asking how God wants to use what He provides through you. Instead of focusing on retirement security, you consider how your resources can advance kingdom purposes both now and in the future. Joseph's story proves that following biblical money principles doesn't guarantee ease, but it does ensure effectiveness. He spent 13 years in slavery and prison before his breakthrough moment arrived. During those difficult seasons, he maintained his integrity and continued developing the character necessary to handle extraordinary responsibility. His financial success wasn't measured only by Egypt's prosperity, but by the preservation of God's covenant people and the demonstration of divine wisdom to pagan nations. Pharaoh and his officials witnessed firsthand that Joseph's God provided superior guidance compared to all their traditional sources of counsel. These 7 habits work together as an integrated system rather than isolated techniques. Divine dependence informed Joseph's planning strategies. Systematic preparation enabled strategic patience during implementation. Ethical accumulation supported transparent stewardship. Everything culminated in wealth that served God's eternal purposes rather than temporary personal desires. The most remarkable aspect of Joseph's financial legacy is its sustainability. The systems he established continued functioning long after his death. Future pharaohs inherited an economic framework that had proven its effectiveness through the most severe crisis in recorded history. This demonstrates what happens when financial decisions align with divine principles rather than human wisdom. Joseph's transformation from prisoner to prime minister illustrates that God can elevate anyone who commits to managing resources according to his standards. Your current financial situation doesn't determine your future potential when you apply these biblical habits with faithful consistency. Remember that Joseph's story isn't primarily about money management. It's about a man who trusted God completely and allowed divine wisdom to guide every aspect of his stewardship responsibility. His financial success flowed naturally from his spiritual maturity and his commitment to serving God's purposes above his own interests. These 7 habits from Joseph's life can revolutionize your financial future starting today. Divine dependence, systematic planning, infrastructure building, strategic patience, ethical accumulation, transparent stewardship, and wealth that serves others. Each habit builds upon the previous one, creating a foundation that can withstand any economic storm. Joseph went from the pit to the palace because he understood that money without godly wisdom leads nowhere, but money guided by biblical principles creates lasting impact. His story proves that following God's financial blueprint doesn't just change your bank account. It positions you to become a channel of blessing for others during their most desperate moments. The same God who gave Joseph supernatural insight into economic cycles wants to guide your financial decisions today. The same principles that saved multiple nations from starvation can protect your family from financial destruction. The same wisdom that elevated a Hebrew slave to rule over Egypt can open doors for your advancement when you apply these habits with faithful consistency. Your financial breakthrough begins the moment you stop trusting your own understanding and start seeking divine direction for every money decision. Whether you're managing $50 or $50,000, these habits will prepare you to handle whatever God provides next. If this video opened your eyes to biblical wealth principles, subscribe to Kingdom Finances and activate notifications to receive more teachings on godly money management. Share this message with someone who needs to hear Joseph's story. Your obedience to these 7 habits might be the key that unlocks provision for your entire family line.